I feel like stress and excitement are like the same emotion when it comes to writing.
I was honestly shocked. I was shocked. Shaking, crying, and throwing up.
Week 4, baby.
They tear apart Voltaire just like afternoon croissants, strolling over bridges that were built in Renaissance. Isn't that what every Roman's love in 20-something?
Let's make sure we're not blurry, please. So in this vlog, we will be documenting the last week of NaNoWRIMO. If you want to catch up on everything that I've been doing for Nano, I will link the playlist down below. Long story short, I have been doing a non-traditional NaNoWRIMO where I've basically just been not worrying too much about word count, but have been making an effort to write more than usual, write as much as I can. I feel like Nano's been going pretty well for me, considering how slow I write. I have definitely had a better writing month this month compared to September and October, so that's a win for me, I guess. I've been dedicating NaNoWRIMO to writing my adult fantasy project, nicknamed Project Night. In the last vlog, I made some decent progress on it. We finished Act 2, we started Act 3. I actually chatted a lot about the draft and everything that I've been feeling about how the plot has been going, what the issues are, how I feel about character development and writing romance in this book. I talked a lot about all of that last week. Just to give you a draft update, right now I am writing the rising action for Project Night. We pretty much will be hitting the climax point of this book at the end of this act, which is, I don't even know how long it is. I think it's 10 chapters. Let me double check right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 chapters, 1 flashback chapter, and 1 interlude chapter. So in total, it's about 10 chapters. It's a very exciting time for the draft. It's stressful, but it's exciting. I feel like stress and excitement are like the same emotion when it comes to writing. I spoke about this again last week, but one thing that I am noticing right now is I feel like my protagonists in this book have kind of gotten a mind of their own a little bit. Like, I don't know if you guys experience this as well, but sometimes my characters just don't listen to me. Like, you start writing and they're doing something else. So my female lead, especially, her name is Anna, and getting into her head has been just an uphill battle. I feel like obviously I'm not going to have her perfectly figured out in the first draft. So what I've decided is I'm gonna start taking notes on how I want to fine-tune the trajectory of her character arc. So specifically her internal conflict, because from an external level, I think her motivation is fine, but internally, I think her journey could be a bit more compelling and more fleshed out. So that's kind of what I want to work on for draft 2. She also has like a complicated family situation that I think could be explored a bit more in revision, and I think there's more opportunity for me to use her complicated family situation to also world build. I think that's something that I've kind of underutilized as a world building tool, specifically like where her family is positioned in society and why she's kind of like at odds with her family and stuff like that. Sunday, fun day. So, last night we broke 60,000 words. I know that I've like been saying that the draft is around 60,000 words, but I actually hit 60,000 words last night, which was exciting. The other reason that the word count keeps fluctuating is because I'm also kind of editing scenes as I go. So sometimes I tend to be like a chronic overwriter. So I kind of like overwrote certain scenes, and then when I go back to edit, I cut out a lot of stuff, so that's why the word count fluctuates like that. But I think we're actually at 60,000 words now, so very, very exciting. We are pretty much entering the last third of the book, and I'm kind of losing my mind a little bit. I think it's a little surreal for me because I felt like this story, it kind of came together so quickly, because usually ideas for me have to brew for a really, really long time before I even draft them. The story was just like, everything just came together so quickly, and I know I've been writing it for like the better part of like 5 months or whatever, but that's still like from inception to almost 65% of the way through the draft. In a weird way, it feels like it's happening really fast. Progress is chugging along. I pretty much have a free day today, so I'm going to try to get through chapter 22, which is the second chapter of Act 3. One issue that I'm actually having right now, it hasn't really affected me as much in any of my other projects, but for some reason I'm thinking a lot about it for this book, and it's the process of figuring out whose POV to be in for which chapters. When I was writing the outline, I looked at all of my main plot events, and I pretty much asked myself which plot events would be more impactful for whichever character's POV. And then I kind of outlined the sequence of the chapters based on that, so that I could have certain plot events happen in certain characters' POV. Now that I'm in the third act though, as I mentioned like in the last vlog, the chapters are getting like, they keep getting longer and longer. And then so I ask myself whether or not I need to like split up the chapters so that it's like 2 chapters instead of 1, but then it kind of messes up whose POV certain things will happen in, because like the sequencing of the chapters gets like messed up. I kind of don't want to change too much right now. I just want to see where this plot will take me, and then I will worry about everything that needs to be changed in the next draft. That's all. Happy Sunday. I'm gonna get writing now. So it's been about an hour, and I've just been rereading some stuff that I wrote yesterday, last night. The interesting thing about writing really, really late at night is sometimes the next day you wake up and you're like, what the heck did I just write? This is definitely the type of chapter that I should not be writing when I'm half asleep. So actually, one thing that I was thinking about a lot last night, and the reason I was thinking about this was I was actually watching ARCANE on Netflix, it's the animated series that's inspired by the League of Legends lore. I think ARCANE, from a writing standpoint, is actually perhaps the best show I watched in 2021. Like, I was just constantly blown away by just all aspects of the writing and character development, pacing, dialogue, scene construction. It was immaculate, and I was honestly shocked. I was shocked, shaking, crying, and throwing up. And I think a lot of it has to do with how efficient among other things, I think the show was just like, even from a production standpoint, animation. But one thing that stood out to me the most was the efficiency of the dialogue. I think this is actually one of the main things that elevates most stories, is how well writers are able to utilize subtext. Because I think when I think of stories that just kind of average or are good but not great, to me personally, a lot of it boils down to subtext, especially when it comes to things like exposition, the ability to imply character motivations and things like that, which is obviously probably something that a lot of us writers, we know that in theory, but actually practicing that and developing that skill is quite difficult, especially, when you're trying to convey a lot of information, whether it's world building things or character motivations. Yeah, I'm feeling
that a lot right now because like I said, I'm writing kind of the rising action of the story. So when you're writing these scenes where plot threads are coming together, you do kind of have to ask yourself, I think, as a writer, how to reveal information in ways that doesn't just feel like you're just like shoveling the answers for the reader, you know what I mean? So that's definitely a challenge that I'm gonna have to overcome. I'm gonna need a little bit more caffeine to get me through that. On a related note as well, this is something I feel like I haven't really mentioned in any of my vlogs before, but it's something that I feel like affects my approach to storytelling almost on a subconscious level. And I don't know if other writers can relate to this, but the idea that all stories are mysteries. I think when you look at storytelling structure, especially as we know it in the West, it tends to be conflict driven, 3-act story structure type deal. So I guess when I say all stories are mysteries, I don't mean that literally every story is about solving some kind of murder or crime, but I often subconsciously take this approach where I think about key plot points as key mysteries. I think the slight difference, I guess, is that I don't look at key plot points as just destinations that need to be hit one after the other for the characters, but as things that need to be unraveled slowly throughout the story so that when things explode or hit a fever pitch or all come together in the climax, the reader can kind of track, the trail of gasoline that you put there to sort of lead up to that moment. And I found that when I used to outline SFF stories, like when I was younger, a lot of my stories, I remember, it would feel quite linear. So it was like character does this, and then they go here and they do this, and then they meet this person, and then they go and do this. So it was very like A, B, C, D. But, as I grew up and stuff, I started treating pivotal plot beats as mysteries in my mind because it became easier for me to think more critically about how I foreshadow, like what makes something compelling, what gives your story that sort of forward momentum from A point to B point, C point. With the mindset of having a sense of mystery in your story, it applies to things like subplots and character arcs as well, I think. Because if you have two characters whose relationship, for example, is incredibly tense, I think there's a lot of intrigue in that. And that intrigue can be built up by choosing how and when you reveal the details of that history. For example. Anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is that to me, I think pacing and sequencing plays a huge role in creating really compelling intrigue. Like, it's not the plot beats themselves that have to be earth-shattering, unique, super complicated, but it's the way that the writer lays it out that makes it compelling. Okay, this is not writing related, but I've been trying to get back into studying Korean again. It's been a really, really long time since I've studied any of it. I used to be really diligent, but it's gotten really bad. A couple vlogs ago, I was doing Duolingo for fun. And then when I tried to do like the Duolingo checkpoint, I failed. So today I've just kind of been like going back through some of my old notes and trying to figure out like how I can get back into studying again, because it was so much easier, I feel like, to study when I had a reason to study. But ever since I've been back, I've just like completely, even my just like comprehension has like gone to shit. I don't know if this is like interesting, but if you've ever like tried to self-study a foreign language, I'm sure you can relate. So actually, I made a bunch of notes when I had just come back from studying in Korea. So basically, this is a list of, there was a specific textbook that I was using. And so then what I did was I basically wrote down all of the grammar points in this textbook.
And then I made like a color-coded legend. The ones that are in yellow are the ones that I felt like I knew already, so I could skip them. Pink means review. Those were the ones that I was familiar with, but I wasn't comfortable with yet. And then blue are like the ones that I barely ever used, that I really needed to study. When you take a break from studying a language and using the language, it's so hard to get back into it. It's been months since I've done this. Okay, I don't know if I can really do this right now. Maybe I'll tackle this again next month because I feel like my NaNoWRIMO brain can't handle this right now. Hello, happy Wednesday. Last night I made some progress on chapter 22, which is the second chapter of Act 3. I was hoping that I would finish it last night, but I did not. I made some decent progress and I like the ideas that are on the page, but I kind of kept getting like distracted by other parts of the draft again, and then I also decided to move on to the next chapter because I started getting ideas for things that need to happen in the next chapter. So I was kind of like going back and forth between writing chapter 22 and chapter 23. Yeah, today I might do the same thing. Like I might finish off chapter 22. It's like mostly done. I just have to fill in some gaps, or I will try to progress chapter 23, which is currently like the harder chapter to write. Basically, chapter 22 is in Felix's point of view, and then chapter 23 is in Anna's point of view. What I have been realizing throughout this drafting process is that Felix's chapters are kind of easier for me to write. I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how Felix's character motivations are a lot more straightforward in my mind, whereas Anna has changed as I've written her. So whenever I have to write her chapters, they don't flow as easily because she's also tied a lot to certain elements of the lore. It's kind of like deeper lore that I haven't completely fleshed out. So whenever I have to like write her chapters, it just takes a lot more time to think about what I actually want to say. Whereas Felix's motivations, like the scale of his motivations are a lot more personal, I guess, but it's fine. We're doing fine. Anyways, there was one chapter that I went back to check and then I got caught up in line editing it because I have zero chill and I cannot help myself. As I was line editing it, I was like, this is interesting. I was having some thoughts. Chapter in particular includes a mild sex scene. It's only like, I think it's like 2 or 3 paragraphs. I don't know. I was like feeling weird about it because sex scenes are an interesting thing, I think, to tackle. You know, I'm talking about outside of the context of like erotica. They're interesting things to tackle in terms of deciding when one is necessary, figuring out the purpose that scene serves. But overall, I'm surprisingly happy with the way that this one turned out. Like when I went back to read it, I was like, this is actually not that bad. So I went back to check the outline and all I had written in my outline, Alex wakes up from a one-night stand. But then when I got into the draft, it sort of felt more effective, I guess, to actually describe the encounter with his guest in a little bit more detail. The scene sort of flowed of its own accord, but I think adding in more details actually allowed me to showcase a different side of Alex's character that I wouldn't have been able to in any of his other encounters. I don't have a ton of practice with writing these types of scenes. Earlier this year I was writing a young adult novel, and then even the book that I was writing last year, it was an adult project, but I never felt like the character arcs or the story ever demanded a sex scene. They just didn't pop up as much in any of my other projects. So yeah, it's interesting because in this project, I feel like these moments definitely are, I shouldn't say like integral to the character arcs, but they definitely feel like effective ways to showcase certain elements of these characters. But it's gonna take me some practice to kind of like find my footing. I think I did read a piece of advice though once, I can't remember where I heard this, but
sex scenes are kind of like fighting scenes. Those types of like action scenes, typically you don't throw in a fight scene and describe the entire fight unless there is a purpose. You shouldn't just throw them in for the sake of throwing them in. Knowing when it's more like efficient to just mention it in passing versus when there's actually a purpose to describing the act itself. And I think this is a pretty good rule of thumb, because I think when you're describing the act itself, it should be tied to some sort of development for the character, or it should reveal some deeper exposition about the characters involved, because otherwise it's kind of like, why do you need to describe it, right? It's tricky because whenever you're writing any scene of vulnerability or emotion, sort of question that you have to ask yourself about how much you want to show versus knowing what to leave in subtext. I feel like I'm talking a lot about subtext in this vlog. Maybe that should be a separate discussion. Like, what does it mean to write with nuance? Because I think heavy-handedness is something that bogs down a lot of stories. Anyways, perhaps I'll consider making that a completely separate video. Just to give you a little peek into how scatterbrained this drafting process for Act 3 is right now, I just skipped ahead a little bit in my outline to refresh my memory on what is coming up in the upcoming chapters that I have to write. Let me just show you what past me put into my outline. Yup. I just straight up have sections in my outline that are just like, figure it out later. So that's where I'm at right now. Pantsing does not work for me. I am not a pantser by nature. My outline has gotten less and less detailed. It's fine, like it's not the end of the world, but it is a little intimidating. Even though I know where I want the characters to end up, it's still very scary as a devout outliner. Hello folks, we have made it to Friday. As someone who wasn't tracking my word count this year, I'm actually feeling okay. Like, I'm about 2 chapters away from the chapter that I consider to be the climax chapter. Like, technically I'm behind because I didn't sort of meet that arbitrary goal, but also if I look at it from a quantity over quality, if I look at it from a quality over quantity perspective, I'm actually happy with chapters that I've written for the start of Act 3, like the way I've laid out the scenes. I think when I look at it from that perspective, can't be too harsh on myself. When I was starting Act 2, I like really was not, my heart was like not in it. I felt like I was just kind of going through the motions, but starting Act 3 has been like a completely different experience. Maybe just because it's like the more exciting part of the draft. They're feeling good. However, with that said, not gonna lie, I'm kind of like ready for Nano to be over. Nano season in general is just like tiring. It's tiring, you know, because you're kind of pushing yourself every day. And this Nano was also different for me because it's the first time I was also doing these vlogs at the same time. It's just a lot. Mentally, it's a lot. Like, as fun as this month has been and as much as I've felt like I've accomplished with this manuscript this month, I think I also just need to calm down a little bit. I think it's also just this, what I'm feeling is like a general feeling of creative burnout. Not as bad as it was last month. Like, I'm doing okay, but it's definitely a lot. When it comes to any of my creative work, like my channel and writing, I don't really know how to set mental boundaries for myself. I actually was thinking about this the other day because I was like, watching a video about like YouTube's design choice to remove dislikes on videos, and corporate YouTube justified this by saying that hiding dislikes on videos helps the mental health of creators. And first of all, the like to dislike ratio is, I think, very important to people on the viewer side of things. And it's also frustrating as a creator myself and as a UX designer myself. I think that there are so many other aspects of the creator experience that negatively affect the mental health of creators. For example, the creator dashboard, which is designed to constantly compare you to the last video that you uploaded. People can't see dislikes anymore, but your work is still reduced to numbers in every other part of the creator experience. So anyway, back on track. That was a side tangent. The way that like Nano pushes you to like constantly grind, and then also just like doing YouTube this year and everything, like I'm feeling okay. I'm in a good place. But yes, I think I definitely need to figure out how to slow down a little bit. There are a couple days left in this month, I know, so I will still be writing towards the end of the month, but I will end this vlog here. Next week, I will be having a wrap-up sort of discussion video, basically just like summarizing my experience this month. I will talk about whether I hit my goals and how it went overall to wrap up the whole experience. And that's all. That's it. We did it. Week 4, baby. Thank you so much for hanging out on this vlog as always. If you want to support the channel, you can like this video and subscribe, and let me know how your nano has gone. Let me know how this final week has been. I hope your projects are going well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.